but I'd like to welcome everybody to our second week of Zoom calls for Pink Talented Angels. And we plan on doing these calls once a week. We are opening ourselves up to do private calls if needed. You would reach out to Jen and ask for advice or something that you need, or reach out to Danielle and we will arrange time to speak with you on marketing, operations, R&D, employment issues, whatever it is, we're here for you. We want you to know that. Just to touch base, we do have some new people that have jumped on Pink Talented Angels. We are an organization that started in 2019, and our goal is to create an ecosystem of women supporting women. We have CEOs, entrepreneurs, and we have founders of the younger generation up and coming, and our goal is to combine both to help lift and motivate your business. That is the whole idea of Pink Talented Angels. I wanted to start with just some current facts before I introduce our two speakers for today. More than 1 million cases of coronavirus have been diagnosed globally. 6.6 million people have filed for unemployment. It is the highest in history. It's happening so quick. And we actually realized that today when we brought on our second resource of how fast things are moving. And so every week we might change resources if we think that, or add resources if we think that there is something that is more important than what the current subject would be. So just so you know, we're always trying to stay on top of the trends to make sure you have all the information that you need. So we have two rock star guests. I can introduce them to you. Our first guest is Mark Siegel. He is a very dear friend of mine, a YPOer. Mark is currently the CEO of Epic Healthcare Staffing. But Mark has a history of starting, leading, and exiting companies. And he is an absolute guru when it comes to how to maintain morale and keep spirits up in a crisis situation with people that work all over nationally. And so he's going to give us his insight, a little bit of what is happening in today's world, as he is in the front of the nursing healthcare staffing system. So he really gets the lowdown on what's happening on the front lines. So excited to have Mark here. Our second guest is Caleb Bullock, and Caleb is a CPA for Somerset CPAs and Advisors. We were very lucky to secure him today, and we thank him for jumping on this call and preparing the slides so quickly. We're going to talk about two parts of the economic injury disaster and the loan program, Paycheck Protection Loan. I don't know what I would even call that, Caleb, but tomorrow they are opening up some very important websites where you as entrepreneurs can go to be able to receive refunds or to be able to get assistance in your business financially. And Caleb is going to walk us through that. We also have been very lucky that Caleb gave us at Pink Talented Angels an incredible deal that we will announce after. If you need help and assistance, Caleb's team can help you, and we'll talk about how that'll work. So let me now introduce and pass off the microphone to Mark. Mark, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lizanne. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm honored to be here, and what I want to do is I'll give you a little bit of an overview on what's going on and how it is affecting business. And I'm going to try and tell you things that you might not be reading about or things that might be a unique angle. And then I'll also tell you a little bit about a few tricks and things that I've used to build culture and morale during tough times. And just as a brief overview, you know, I'm what I'll call a long-term CEO. I've been doing this for about 20 plus years as a CEO. I spent a lot of time, about 8 years, in the distressed space, which is everyone gives it funny names like special situations to make it seem nice. but it's dealing with businesses that are in strategic, operational, or financial challenge. A lot of that was running businesses through the recession of 07 and 09. So I've been through really ugly stuff globally, in the US economically, and I'll tell you a few things, but the first one I think is very important is that I want to assure you that you can still thrive, be happy, have a happy team and a good culture, despite the fact of what's going on around you. So I was running businesses that I was taking through and out of bankruptcy, doing all this, and I can tell you, you had happy people at times, you had unhappy at times, but you had thriving, you had opportunity. It can be done. It's a different mindset. So I'll talk a little bit about that. What's fundamentally going on right now, as I see it, and all of this is opinion, is we have a unique situation, which is a health crisis that's kind of driving social upheaval that created a financial recession, which is now transforming how we're going to operate business in the future. So it happened in this successive order. We had a health crisis. Everyone was forced to lock down. So you had a social upheaval where people weren't going out, doing anything, spending money. That's creating this financial recession, and that's changing how we do things. It just happened successively like that. So as you look at it, I tend to look at these as opportunities. Now, you hear people say it in that campy way of, it's an opportunity. I view it as opportunity means something's happening that's dynamic and changing. How do you find a way to grow through it? There's a few things that I think are going to transform business, and I'll get into the culture, which is right now there's a few things that will forever be different. So we are not going to go back to the way things were a few months ago. The first is we've all finally realized that what happened 7,500 miles away affected everybody here. And the world is truly interconnected. So we've all talked about a global world. No one really believed it. So we'd talk about it, but then you'd ask somebody, well, if something happens in Turkmenistan, is it really going to impact you? The answer is, well, I don't mean global. I mean if it happens in Europe or if it happens in Beijing. We are truly global, which is every corner of the globe is being impacted by this. And I think that's a wonderful realization for the future, which means we can no longer dismiss each other as countries, as individuals, and really need to embrace it. How we do that is going to be a struggle, but I think that's important. Next thing that's really interesting is working remote, which is what we've all been forced to do in some way, is never going to go back. So what used to be viewed by companies as it's a perk to let you work remote, or if you can earn this, or if we have to, is now going to be viewed as it's just normal. And what that might mean is everyone works 3 days in the office and 2 out. Who knows? But one of the great things is going to be the talent pool. So if you had a small business 4 months ago, you would look for people around your trading area where your company is. Maybe you'd look in Dallas, but now you're going to say, well, hey, this remote thing really works. I can hire anyone, anywhere in the world if they're talented. That's going to open up such an amazing array of talented individuals everywhere because now it's going to be accepted. We're also finally seeing what my teenage kids have seen for a long time, which is video really is the way to go. So I'm in healthcare. We staff nurses all around the country. We have 1,000 nurses. We staff clinicians for clinical trials. We staff the government. We bring in clinicians overseas. We've got about 2,000 or 3,000 out at any given time. For years, everyone's talked about telemedicine being the next wave, but no one actually believed it. And I guarantee very few of you probably embraced it. That's going to change. You're having calls like this, which is changing the way we do things. Video gatherings are going to enable you to go to a video cocktail party that you might normally miss, and it's going to be acceptable. It's really going to change things. Now, from a small business or a business operating, I think the biggest change you're going to see is if you have investors or a lender or a board, everyone used to say, show me your growth plan, show me your business plan. What you're now going to see is, show me your downside plan, show me your black swan plan for the rare event that happens. We are all going to be much more focused on what can go wrong. That's a good and a bad, but I think as you look at things, we can no longer dismiss, well, what if? Because the once in every 100 years what ifs keep happening more than every 100 years, so it's going to change the mindset. And I think a big thing that everyone should be thinking about is this is going to create a whole new role. So in a few years, I believe that every company of significance is going to have a chief health officer. Just as much as you might have a CFO, a CEO, a chief marketing officer, there's going to be a chief health officer. Because what we're realizing is just how important that is, which is the government isn't going to look out for you. It's going to be up to you to look out for your people, to take care of them, to insure them. And I think we're entering what's a different world, which is a lot of people are going to be insecure coming out of this. They're going to be afraid. They've lost their job. They're not sure what's happening. So the role of the CEO and the leader is going to be even more important to not just be a strong businesswoman, businessman, but to be a strong person. And I think that the role in the past has been for people is you trust leaders who are either very compassionate or you'll look at some and say they're very talented and knowledgeable. You're going to have to be both in this new world, because what we saw is lots of businesses that are really led by very bright people are just hurt very badly now. And the key thing is going to be that element of compassion. So I could talk to you about a ton of trends that are going on, but I don't want to spend too much time, and I can answer questions on it. But what I wanted to do is walk you through a little bit on culture and morale that can apply to anything. And I think, do you guys want to run this presentation, Lizanne, or should I share my screen?
Yeah, I think let's have you.
I can do it if that's
okay. Yeah, let's.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Great.
All right, so if you want to click on the first slide, my name's Mark, you get that point. Is it up there? Yeah, hold on. Okay, this is important, and I will tell you this because I've heard a million speakers. I am not selling a book. I'm not promoting a tour. I have nothing to sell you. I don't do private consulting. I'm telling you this because it's the stuff I use and I find value in. There is no ulterior motive. So take it with that grain of this works for what I've done. Please take it from that perspective of only to help. If you click on the next slide, this is really important. So the way I view the relationship between a person, an employee in the company is really fourfold, which is if you work for a business, there is a deal. And most people, if you want to keep a talented person, they have to have four things met. One is what I call significance. She needs to feel that she is doing work that matters to the organization and is appreciated. The second is growth. He or she needs to be learning, growing, and being challenged. The third is enjoyment. The person needs to like a day. And the fourth is value acknowledgement. They need to believe their compensation reflects the value they bring. Now, if these four are not all met, and again, it varies by day and it doesn't mean every day, then ultimately you will have someone that will leave or be unhappy, or you won't get what we call their heart and mind. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're a company and you really pay someone a ton of money and you make sure that they have a wonderful day, that you have puppies in the place, it's a ton of fun, but they're not growing or being developed, and they don't feel that what they do matters. Over time, what they're going to do is lose that emotional connection to the business. They're not going to feel that it matters, and therefore they're going to phone it in. Let's just say that they do things that matter and it's incredibly important, and they're paid a lot of money, and they love being there each day, but they're not growing or developing. What's going to happen is, over time, they're going to feel like this isn't going anywhere, and I'm not able to do more. They're going to be disappointed. So the magic formula that I look at here is, if you can find a way to have people and understand what hits each of these boxes, they will be engaged, they will be happy, they will stick around, they will give you their best. And each of these four boxes varies based on the person. So I'll give you one quick example of where I learned my lesson the hard way, which is I had a strong performing woman. I was going to promote her to a VP role, and this is years ago, and she was going to be able to travel and go to Europe and do amazing things. I sat down with her and I told her that. She started crying. And it was not the happy crying, it was the unhappy crying. And I was shocked. I'm like, what's wrong? You know, and she's like, well, I'm so honored, but this isn't what I want to do. I want to be home and grow my family and spend time and balance it. And I realized I did not understand what mattered to her and what was important to her. I learned that lesson, and after that, we now ask these questions to everybody. Now, you don't have to ask it straight out, but really, if you look, what matters and what makes people feel important, if you give them a project and they do it, you should be willing to applaud it. If you're not, they're not doing something that's important. So I think it's very important for me in running the organization to understand what these 4 are for each person. Therefore, we can ensure that each one is engaged and it's personalized. Okay, we can go to the next slide. This one I love. So I believe that a healthy organization has team members who feel greater accountability to each other than the boss. Okay, so I believe in lateral accountability and appreciation. Further, a healthy team should thrive on appreciation from each other more than the boss. The boss's job, and I just used the word boss for example, is to put the people, process, and systems in place to create that culture of lateral accountability. So I don't want people looking at me saying good job or hey, how did I do? And I don't want them waiting for their supervisor to come down and say great job. You want them looking at each other and feeling that ownership. Just like a sports team, you want them high-fiving each other, not looking at the coach on the bench. We use a system called Kazoo. Here's a few screenshots. There's great technology, and we put this in place about 4 years ago. And what it is it's lateral accountability. We load up points into the system, and each month we give points to everybody to give out. We then have core values. If you look down at some of these, you'll see things like we go all in or be comfortable being uncomfortable. And what we do is we encourage people to acknowledge their peers when they've done something well. Here's an example. In one of these, you see Cynthia Hernandez acknowledging 4 people. You see Lauren Baus acknowledging Bridget. You see Jennifer Smith. And what they're doing is they're giving each of them points, and they're acknowledging what they like about them and the core value it brings. Those points, the recipient can turn those in for gift cards or prizes, or they can turn it in for points to give to other people. To show you the impact of this, about 60% of the points that people are given, the prize or gift they turn it into is points to give back to other people. They don't actually turn it into gifts to buy themselves. We have this on TV screens throughout our offices, and we have offices in 5 different states and in 2 countries. This streams in real time. You'll see people from our Manila office being acknowledged. And the magic is when somebody that understands your role, that's a peer of yours, it shows appreciation, it means a ton. When your boss does, who knows? So this has been huge, and we've really created this culture of peer accountability and peer appreciation. The next slide is what I like to refer to as a healthy culture is comfortable being uncomfortable. This is where I push a little bit, which is I believe in the rule of thirds. 2/3 being comfortable and known and 1/3 being uncomfortable and new is something healthy. And I'll give you an example that's not on this slide, which is for most people, if you walk into a room of 9 people at a cocktail party, if you know 6 and don't know 3, you're really excited. You see a lot of faces, you feel comfortable, but you also know that you're going to meet some new people. Unless you're a huge extrovert, if you walk into a cocktail party and you only know 3 and there's 6 new, you start feeling a little uncomfortable. If you walk in and you know all 9 really well, over a period of time, you're not getting a chance to meet new, and you start saying, I'll see those people some other time. The same rule of thirds happens with almost everything. So on the next slide, an approach we take is if you look, and I'm just using the example of a 40-hour work week, what that would mean is about 26 hours are things that you consider comfortable. And comfortable means I know how to do it and I'm pretty good and I don't get too anxious about it. And 13 hours is a little uncomfortable. That doesn't mean your stomach's upset and you're drinking Pepto-Bismol. It means it's a little out of your zone. All that means basically is if your team can be doing about an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon of something a little out of their comfort zone, they're going to feel proud of themselves. They're going to feel energized. That could be something small, like presenting in a meeting they might not normally present. It could be something like sending them into a project they haven't been working on before. It could be including somebody who's in operations on a finance call to hear it and see what's going on. It doesn't need to be throwing them in the fire. but it keeps people fresh and energized. And we all know what happens when you're a little uncomfortable and you give that presentation and you're nervous. Think of the feeling that happens after you finish the presentation. That's when you're brave, that's when you're powerful. It's an amazing feeling for a culture. I believe the leader's job is to create and drive those opportunities where there can be discomfort. So I'll look and say, hey, Pete, I know you're in this meeting. Why don't you and Jenny tell us about this instead of Jake? Now, I'm not going to throw anyone on the spot, or I might just ask somebody that doesn't usually have an opinion in a room, hey, Susan, why don't you give us your opinion? I've made her a little uncomfortable, but I've given her a chance. I believe this works incredibly well. On the next slide, I'll just give this one's one of my favorite ones. I'm kind of an idiot, and when it comes to Halloween, this is me in my variety of different Halloween costumes. And the goal that we had in our organization is, I'm a big believer in a variety of different things. And one is called pattern interrupt. And pattern interrupt means doing what people don't expect, and it keeps things fresh. So it's asking a question you might not normally do. It's doing something different. So this is a good example, which is when I joined the organization, everyone's used to, you have the big Christmas party. And everyone does it, and we all know this. We're like, all right, I guess we have to go to the Christmas party, and it'll be fun. I said, I want us at Epic Healthcare and Emerald, we're going to own Halloween. We don't care about certain holidays. We're going to own Halloween. And I made a huge deal. And that first year when I showed up as Gene Simmons from KISS up there, about 70% of the people did not dress up that year. And my job was to make people uncomfortable for being not dressed up. Like, this is what the new normal is. So Halloween became the biggest deal ever, and we owned it. But the argument is I had to be uncomfortable to get, there too. So this one's a little bit for fun, but what I do believe is a healthy organization steps out of its comfort zone. And if you're going to ask your people to do that, you have to do it too. Because ultimately, we live in a world where you're either leading from the front or you are leading from behind. If you are pushing people to places, I do not believe you have a healthy culture. People don't respond to pushing. They respond to pulling. So when I look at my job is the chief pulling officer, which is I'm the one that should say things, not go get that hill, you can do it. I should be saying, follow me. I should be saying, come with me. I should be saying, let's go. And then I start pulling, and just like when you pull something that has wheels on it, before you know it, when you start slowing down, it rolls past you and it powers over you. So I look and say, if you want a great culture, pull, don't push. And you can tell when you're pushing versus pulling. So in a brief kind of summary slide, I believe that the key to healthy culture, especially in a bad time, is personalized relationship. It's all about a unique culture for everybody. The second is lateral and peer accountability and appreciation is incredibly powerful. And I'll tell you why. When I get busy, if I don't give people feedback during a week, it doesn't matter. They're getting it from their peers. The next is discomfort is not a bad word. It keeps people fresh. And then I'll sell you my book and my tour tickets later. But all kidding aside, if we look at this, I want to encapsulate it into one very important message, which is you cannot control the weather. So I tell a lot of people, as a CEO, we like to believe we control the weather. And the weather is what's happening outside of your building. You do not control the macroeconomy. You do not control a virus. You do not control global warming. These are things that are happening. You can help and you can fight them and you can do what you do. But as a leader of an organization, my job is to deal with the weather and respond to it, not fight it. So if we are entering a tough recession and if we have to work at home because of all this, it sucks. And I'm going to call my friends, I'm going to call Lizanne, and I'm going to cry on the side, and I'm going to complain. But then I'm going to wake up and say, how do I make the best of this one? Because that's what a leader does. And what I'll tell you right now is, if you want to endear yourself to people and do things and do amazing things, they don't happen during good times. So my career was built off of bad times. Because I'll give you an example. Nobody is impressed by the pilot of a 747 that flies a smooth flight across the Atlantic and lands at the airport. You are impressed by the pilot who had an engine on fire, the Sullys who land their plane on the Hudson, the people that have something that goes wrong and they do it. In other words, leaders and CEOs are made or broken during tough times. No one can be a really strong performer during a great time. So what I would challenge all you to do is embrace the fact that you have a time period that is a crappy time, which gives you the opportunity to be a hero to your people, to drive and do interesting things, and to carve out who you are as a person. And with that, that's why I enjoy this, even though I wouldn't have chosen it. So I hope that helps you, gives you some unique tips and tricks that aren't just the standard stuff you read in a book.
Thanks, Mark. It's so true, right? There's opportunity in a crisis. And we talked about that last week. So Mark's slides will be on the website, the lizannefalsetto.com website. So in the next 24 hours, if anybody wants to access them, they will be there. So please keep an eye out for them. Mark, thank you. I love the devil. The devil. That's really you, Mark.
Yeah, don't tell anyone. It's my hide in plain sight, Lizanne. Hide in plain sight.
You're good. Thank you very much. Appreciate you spending the time.
Sure.
So, Caleb, let's introduce Caleb. Thank you for being here, and again for jumping on so quickly after our chat this morning. Really appreciate it. I'll hand it off to you.
Sure. Yeah. First, Mark, that was awesome. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. It's in the time where you're constantly hearing bad news and doom and gloom all over the place. It's nice to hear a refreshing outlook. So yeah, really appreciated that. But yeah, thanks, Lizanne, for having me. As she said, my name's Caleb Bullock. I'm a CPA based out of Indianapolis, and we kind of struck up a conversation today, talking a little bit about some of the loan relief that has come out as a result of the stimulus package that I'm sure everybody heard about and is anxiously awaiting, employees anxiously awaiting checks, and business owners scrambling to fill out loan applications to try to keep things afloat. But we started talking about it a little bit today, and if there is one thing that I know for certain, it's that nobody has any idea at all what to expect from these loans, how they're getting processed. And so I thought that I would come and shed a little light and hopefully provide you guys with some information and some resources that you can take back to your teams. I guess journeying back, so there's two primary loans. And I'm afraid, unfortunately, the stereotype holds up. These slides are incredibly boring that I put forward, so I apologize there. But there are two primary loans that are going to be applicable for the time that we're in today. The one that everybody's hearing about, and really the sexy one, is the PPL, the Paycheck Protection Loan, that we'll talk about here in a minute. But the first one that kind of it has gone under the radar a little bit is the EIDL, so the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So there's pros and cons to both loans, and I'll try to hit at a very high level some of the things that you guys can keep in mind. The EIDL is a loan that is directly with SBA. So if anybody's familiar with the SBA loan process, or the loan process in general, as you guys are obtaining financing for your businesses, the SBA process is incredibly invasive. There's a lot of red tape to jump through. Underwriting with banks is, to this day, probably one of my least favorite exercises is going through that process. However, the EIDL is extremely favorable financing. Why is it so favorable? Number one, it is the utilization of it can be used for working capital. So, if you're sitting here saying, well, you know what, my business isn't completely destitute, but supply chains have dried up. My business development pipeline is maybe a little bit dry. My revenue projections are down a little bit. I'm not sure what to do about my employees. This could be a very, very favorable loan. So it is it's historically a disaster loan. So it's something that's been in place that is for the sole purpose of keeping things afloat while there's a disaster at foot. So a couple of pros to keep in mind. Number one, if it's under a $200,000 loan, there is no personal guarantees or collateral that's required. And that is huge and unprecedented for financing, as I'm sure most of you guys know. Number two, something really cool that's unique about this loan is that when you fill out an application, you can request an advance of 10 grand. And if for some reason your application got denied, you get to keep the 10 grand. So small potatoes, but kind of a nice little perk to help offset some of the cost of your time. I guess the individuals that would make a lot of sense for this, small growing businesses, if you have real estate holdings or minimal payroll or no payroll, there's a lot of real estate investors that are really struggling right now, and we'll talk about the payroll loan here in just a second. But this one's really a nice loan. And terms are unprecedented. So it's very strange, but you can't request the total that you're borrowing. You can't request the term, and you can't request the interest rate. So it's a little bit of ambiguity and a crapshoot, if you will, when you go through the application process. However, the amortization on these loans go out as long as 30 years. So, which again is unheard of when you're talking about financing for a commercial loan. Interest rates are capped at 4%, fixed. So a 4% fixed loan over 30 years, as you can imagine, the debt service on that is virtually non-existent. So very favorable loans. The other component to that is that the proceeds can be used for almost anything. So we have a lot of clients that are looking at these loans to and using them as a mechanism to refinance some of their maybe less favorable debt. So something I definitely consider. It's a loan directly with the SBA. The only downside really is that, like, nobody will be surprised by this at all, but the SBA is being inundated right now with requests, and the website is perpetually crashing. So we had a conversation earlier today, and the question was brought up. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but every time I try to get onto this website, it's crashing, and that is the norm. So we've had a little bit of success filling out these applications after hours. I know it's a pain in the butt, but that's just one of those things you have to do. The other thing that I would mention too is, if you get into the process, you'll find that it's a very simplistic application process. There's a million people out there that will offer to help you for a fee, but I would say before you want to pay anybody to do this for you or to walk you through it, just go to the website and check it out yourself. It's literally 4 or 5 slides with some very basic information, and it's a very easy loan to apply for. The other thing that I'll mention too is the EIDL as well as the PPL loan. One of the main benefits is that there are no early payment penalties. And by that, I mean, say I'm a business owner, man, my pipeline's dried up. I'm really worried that if things don't turn around, I'm going to have to let my people go here in a couple of months. And I really don't want that to happen, and losing sleep, high levels of stress. Well, this is a really nice loan to be able to apply for, have it ready and waiting, and provided that the economy turns around and we experience another boom, and the virus gets under control, and all these things happen that we all hope will happen, you can pay the loan back and you're done. No penalties and no fees to be able to apply for the loan. That's the other thing too. If you've done an SBA loan before, normally when you hear, oh yeah, there's this very favorable financing, that's great, but how much am I going to pay to the bank to do this loan in the first place? SBA fees can be pretty high. Commercial loans, the fees there can be pretty high. There are no fees at all to apply for this EIDL loan. So there is really not a lot of downside to be able to reach out and try to get some support for your businesses that are struggling a little bit right now. So I guess we can go over and talk a little bit about the sexy loan, which is the PPL loan. The Paycheck Protection Loan, or you'll hear it referred as the Payroll Protection Program. Not a mouthful at all. But this is the loan that everybody's been talking about. This is the one that we have, not exaggerating, millions and millions of small businesses that are applying for literally tomorrow and next week. The primary reason is that the loan is forgivable, provided that you use the funds to make sure that you hold on to your people. So it can be used for a variety. It can really be used for anything, but the forgiveness component is if you're using it for your payroll, so for your employees. And if you manage to hold on to your employees, it's forgiven, and it's basically a grant that you can use to help sustain your business during the next couple of months. So a couple of things about the CARES Act and about the PPL. Again, very, very easy, fairly straightforward application process. It is much more invasive than the EIDL because there's some calculation involved, because the borrowing base of the loan is based off of your average monthly payroll, which there are some things that go into that, times a multiple. There's no fee to borrow, so very similar to the EIDL. There's none of your standard SBA fees to be able to get into this thing. So the forgiveness component is, like I said, unprecedented and very, very attractive. Couple that with the fact that there are little to no fees to apply for this, and it makes it you can see why there are millions of companies that are trying to take advantage of this. So the only con, I've been asked this no less than 100 times just in the last week. Well, what's the downside? What are we missing here? The only con is the fact that there is a finite number of resources here. So timing is really of the essence. If this is something that you need and you have payroll, which 99% of us have payroll expenses, even if it's just yourself. If you have a small business that's growing and you are the only individual that is taking a paycheck out of the business, that is something where you can still apply and you can still obtain some funding through this program. So there's a lot of people that are flooding the system. Originally, SBA, the agency, said that they were going to administer the loan themselves. Well, as I mentioned with the previous loan, the system crashed immediately. And they said, yeah, there's no chance at all that we're going to be able to administer this loan. And so they brought in approved SBA lenders. So most of the banks that you guys probably work with are more likely than not probably SBA approved. If not, most of the big dogs that you guys are very familiar with are SBA approved. So most of these banks are really starting to get their feet under them and starting to understand what's expected of them. It's a very unusual time because the banks really just found out just a matter of weeks ago that they were going to be asked to administer these programs. And so from an application process, a normal SBA, the bank takes on 20% of the liability and the SBA takes on 80%. So you have to apply through the SBA and go through their process, but you also have to go through the bank's process. So there is a couple of different hoops that you have to jump through. So this plan is just an SBA loan, but it's administered by your friendly neighborhood bank that's an SBA lender. Some banks are kind of throwing up their hands and saying, you know what, we're not interested in participating in this because there's not very much clarity from SBA as far as what to expect and what the expectations of the lenders are and what the application process looks like. And just to provide a little bit of context, SBA, so it was announced that these loans are going to, they're going to start accepting applications tomorrow. However, they keep changing the required application. They literally changed it last night and they changed it again not 4 hours ago. And so a lot of the banks are kind of throwing up their hands and saying, we're not ready. We're not ready to start taking these applications. So the good news for this group is that if this is the first time you're hearing about this or the first time that you're really thinking about it, you do likely have some time, a little bit of time, to be able to get some things together and to start going down this application process. There's been a a multitude of estimates as far as how quickly the funding is going to go. Some people have said, well, we're expecting the entire allotment to go in one day because there's so many people that are flooding the system. I would say that, I mean, educated guess, I highly doubt that that's going to happen because there's going to be a lot of financial institutions that are really struggling with the quantity of applications that all come through at the same time. So I would envision that it'll probably be next week before a lot of these financial institutions really start to process some of these loans. And so you do have some time. And the other thing that we're hearing that I would really, if I could speculate a little bit, I would say that even if the funding gets eaten up in the first initial tranche, my guess is that Congress is going to approve additional funding for a very similar, if not completely identical, loan. So some of the specifics, you might say, okay, forgiveness of loan, what's the catch? There's gotta be something that I'm missing here. So I'll just walk you through an example. So I have a client we've been working with. They are a small business, a couple million in sales per year, but 90% of their operating expense is their payroll. And we had a conversation about a month ago, and he said, man, I don't know about this stuff. It looks like projections are that the economy is going to take a hit. I don't know what that's going to mean for my pipeline. I am not going to fire my people. They're like my family, and I would rather not take a salary, and I would rather sell off all my assets than fire my people. Very high levels of stress. So this loan came out, and we've been working with him through the process. And we just found out today that he's been approved for an $800,000 loan. And he's going to use 100% of it to make sure that he does not have to let anybody go in his business. And because that is his goal, if he succeeds and doesn't let anybody go, 100% of that amount is going to be forgiven over the course of the next few months. So a couple of common questions that we get from clients. Well, I'm in the restaurant industry, so I had to let people go. Or I had a conversation today with somebody that said, I own some hotels. I had to let people go. And if that's the case, all hope is not lost. It is still a very, very favorable termed financing opportunity. Even if you do not have the opportunity to get any of it forgiven, which is, I would say, is less than 1% of folks out there. But even if that's the case, it's a 2-year amortization, so very short amortization, but the interest rate is 0.5%. So it's basically free. It's very, very cheap money. Yes, paid out over 2 years, but similar to the previous loan, there's no penalty for prepaying it. And let me paint you a picture. Say you own a restaurant. You've got 25 FTEs, 50 people, 25 FTEs. The main lobby shuts down. You're only doing delivery. So you have to cut all the way down to 5 FTEs. You can still apply for this loan. And despite the fact that not all of it's going to get forgiven, the fact that you were able to hold on to 5 of your 25, that component, that component, 20%, is going to be forgiven. And it's basically free money that you can use to fund the payroll of your folks. So very, very minimal downside. And, so our firm, we work predominantly with privately held companies, and we have recommended it to literally 99% of our clients to apply for this loan. So you've seen a couple of things on the screen. We don't need to go through this. It's some basic information there, but next steps. A lot of people, I've heard the question, okay, well, what exactly do I do from here? I acknowledge everybody is suffering in one way or another. I had a conversation with a client a couple of days ago, and he said, I don't know how I feel about applying for this loan. Yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity. I'm not really sure what the rest of my year is going to look like. But what if I don't need it? Because I don't really feel comfortable taking on a debt or a loan. And very easy, just pay it back. Pay it back, and the amortization stops, it is and I may get this wrong, but I believe it's it's between 2 and 6 months of a grace period as far as how long you have until the amortization starts. So as you can imagine, it is a very, very favorable and attractive safety blanket. Okay, so application processes for both. What are next steps? Number one, you can apply for both. So that's a common question, and there was some questions back and forth about whether that was going to be allowed. Yes, you can apply for both. If you have multiple companies, you can apply for a variety of different businesses. The EIDL is extremely simplistic. You just go to the SBA's website, and I can send out a link to that website that'll take you directly to their very simplistic application process. Certainly call your CPA if you're feeling uncomfortable, or or you're an attorney if you feel like incurring some hefty fees. But I would highly recommend that you check it out yourself, because even if you don't have an accounting bone in your body, you can probably weed through this application fairly easily. So that's just a matter of following the link and taking care of that one. The PPL is a little bit more complicated because you do have to funnel it through an approved SBA lender. So a couple of options for you. Number one, call your CPA. If it's a national or if it's a fairly mid-size or large firm, they will have they should have a very good understanding of what this program is and some resources in place to help you accomplish what your goals are, getting the most funding available. I highly suggest that you work with your accountants or your CPA, because there is some calculation that's involved to be able to calculate what your borrowing base is. And why is that important? With millions of applications flooding into the system, if your application is incorrect and they need to send it back to you to make corrections, you are going to the back end of the queue. And so, as you can imagine, when there's a finite number of resources, to incur a relatively small fee to be able to get the comfort of making sure that it's done right and submitted, it's something we highly encourage. So call your CPA, call your attorney, call your banker. If you've got a close relationship with your banker, if you have other loans or financing with your bank, sometimes they have very, very hands-on approach to be able to help you apply for this loan, and you can cut the rest of the folks out. Just go directly with your bank. And at a minimum, even if you do decide that you want to use your CPA to help you get this loan approved, it still makes a lot of sense to call your bank and include your CPA on that phone call, but call your bank and find out what the application process looks like. Because unfortunately, while the application comes directly from the SBA, every bank has different requirements. Some banks have you upload it to their system. Some banks have you mail in paper copies. Some banks have you email it in. Everybody's different. So you want to make sure you have an understanding of what the expectations are. The name of the game here, guys, is quickness. So, as we mentioned, we want to get these things in as fast as humanly possible. But the overarching theme is really the overarching theme of the last month. It's the unknown. It's ambiguity. It's what is this loan process going to look like? I'm sure about if I'm sure of nothing, I'm sure there are going to be bumps in the road from SBA standpoint and from your bank standpoint. So there's going to be some pain points. So if I can encourage you to have some grace, we all want the same thing. We want our clients to be able to obtain as much financing as they can to be able to keep their folks employed. We want the storm to be weathered for a couple of months, and we want to help you guys get there. And that's what the banks want too. They also want to make money, obviously. Like I said, to reiterate, you do not pay the bank anything. The SBA will pay the bank a portion of the loan or not a portion of your loan, but a percentage of the loan that you're able to get as a thanks for processing our loan. So there's some upside for the banks, but very little downside for you guys. So those are the two plans that are in existence right now. I would really recommend checking out both of them because they are some unprecedented financing opportunities. And because there's little to no fees to apply for these, worst case scenario is it gets rejected and you're in the same place you were in before. So that's what I've got. And it looks like I've got a question down here.
Caleb, before you start, let's just, and then we'll go through a few questions.
Sure.
You made 2 points that were really valuable this morning. You said if you go in and fill the material out and it crashes, try to do it at odd hours. Can you give a few tips around how can they get in? We know that the system's crashing. What do you suggest in order for our team, our group, to be able to slide in and get it done?
Right. Yeah, odd hours. And we've seen that even that is not a foolproof plan. And it's very, very frustrating when you are getting ready to hit submit and it doesn't go through. But keep trying, because it's something that, from what we've been told, the SBA is working day and night to fix that problem. And so, fill out your application. It's at odd hours. Luckily, it's, like I said, it's a pretty straightforward application. And so save the application right before you hit submit. That way you can get back in and you don't have to recreate a lot of your work. But for the most part, it's relatively straightforward to get that process done. The only tip I would give you on the other side, on the PPL loan, is get yourself moving sooner rather than later. And a couple of things is your payroll reports. Get your hands on your payroll reports from your payroll providers. Whoever does your payroll, I guarantee you they are getting bombarded with requests for annual payroll reports. So dig those suckers up and get those set aside. A couple of other things that go into that calculation: if you offer a 401k match, those matching funds can be included in your calculation of payroll. If you offer group insurance and you are on the hook for that for your employees, that's included as well. So and your state unemployment tax, those payments are included as well. So there's a variety of different payments that, if you're making payments towards your folks' payroll, get those documents together, and that'll help whoever's preparing it, even if it's you or if it's your banker, if it's your CPA, that'll help them streamline the process and keep the thing moving. Great. Thank you. I just wanted you to give them those tips. So sure. Can you answer some questions? That would be so great. Sure. Okay, so we've got a couple questions here. One of the questions: is it possible to fund startup of a new business using any of the new programs? Unfortunately, no, it is not. Now, the EIDL, it can be used for working capital. So that is one where you can be creative. And if you have the capacity to be able to start either a subsidiary or an affiliate of an existing business, then you can borrow against the EIDL, use that EIDL for working capital at your existing business, and then use some of the savings to hire employees for your affiliate or your subsidiary, and do it that way. The PPL, your hands are a little bit tied because there's probably other financing opportunities that you would want to use before using the PPL for those purposes. The PPL application starts 4/3. Is that Eastern time? Do we know? So I will tell you that the 4/3 timeline is not going to be accurate. Even as soon as 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, we were right before our call here. I was getting notifications that a lot of the banks that we're working with, Chase Bank, Huntington Bank, a lot of the big boys are saying, yeah, we're not ready for this. We're not going to start the application process until next week. And the banks that we've heard that are, so some of the smaller community banks that are trying to get out in front of this, saying, yeah, send us the applications. We'll get this thing moving. They are going to sit in a file and wait until next week until they get a little bit of clarity. So As far as what time zone, it's really going to depend on your bank. So your first call, tomorrow morning, or if you've got a close relationship, call them tonight and wake them up, which I guess it's only 6:30 there. But find out what their specific situation is with the bank that you're working with. Is 1099 payments considered payroll? That's a great question and a very common question. The answer to that, unfortunately, is no. 1099 payments are not considered payroll. The reason being is because 1099 recipients, so private contractors, are actually considered. They're actually considered small businesses, and they can actually apply for this loan as well. So if you are a 1099 contractor, you can apply for the loan, and your quote unquote payroll that you would use to calculate the borrowing base that you have would be those 1099s. So if you're the business owner and you're paying a contractor, unfortunately, you can't double dip. You can't take credit for that, and then the 1099 individual will be eligible to take credit for that. So it's a good question. A sole proprietor, I don't believe a program is available to me to apply yet. Is that correct? When is it that I can apply to both? So actually, if you're a sole proprietor, you can apply to both. The EIDL is available right now. So you can apply anytime that you've got the capacity to do that, provided that, again, the system doesn't crash. And then the PPL loan, the second loan that we're talking about, you should be able to apply depending on when your bank is taking applications. Our president made an announcement earlier today that said that it doesn't matter if the banks are ready or not. We're going live. We're going live on Friday. So I would call your bank and find out what their protocol is. But technically, tomorrow is the day that you can start taking applications, and you have, I believe it's 6 weeks to be able to finalize your application, provided that the funds last that long. As a sole W-2 employee of my company, I applied for unemployment 2 weeks ago. How does this affect the application of these loans? Should I cancel that? So if you are the sole W-2 individual of your company, you are going to be eligible to apply for those loans. The loan, or that PPL loan, is based off of your average monthly payroll as calculated from 2019. So if you took a wage in 2019, even if you were the only individual, you are eligible to borrow against the PPL, and provided that you continue to keep yourself employed or pay yourself, you can use those funds to pay yourself, and it's forgiven. So as you can imagine, if you're doing the math with me, very, very favorable. Because say you made 100 grand, you're the only employee in your business. Well, let's keep it simple. Say you made 120,000 and you're the only employee in your business. 10,000 bucks per month times 2.5, you've got a $25,000 cap that you can borrow against. And another thing that's worth mentioning that I don't know that I mentioned before, but the cap is the max that you can borrow. The amount that they actually loan out is at the sole discretion of the SBA. So if you're eligible for 25,000, it might be 25,000, it might be 15. We're not really sure how that's going to work. But if you're the only person there and you've got $25,000 to keep yourself employed for a couple of months, then buoy for you. How many EIDLSs can I apply for with additional subsidiaries? So that's another great question. The answer to that is that we are recommending to apply for an EIDLS or an EIDL with all of the subsidiaries. So there's a section in the PPL where you accumulate all of your affiliates, and there's a very specific definition for what is an affiliate, but most subsidiaries would be considered that. But the EIDL, because there is no forgiveness component to it, you can apply for as many as you have. So yeah, again, very, very favorable terms. If I convert 1099 payments to employees, I only have 3 of them. I include that as payroll. Okay, so yes, you absolutely can. The only caveat that I would give you is, and I'm not an attorney, but the Department of Labor has been very, very aggressive on the classification of 1099 employees and W-2 employees. If you, in the past, there was some ambiguity, maybe some gray area. Some people would call them 1099, some people would call them W-2. But that's something that today's day and age, you absolutely don't want to get that wrong, because if you do, the DOL can sink your business. The fees are astronomical, and they will they'll tear your heart right out. So I would do a little bit of research before you make that conversion, or contact your attorney to make sure that that conversion is accurate. But yes, if those are if those are converted into employees, you can use a different way to calculate your eligible borrowing based on the PPL. Okay. Next question is, I have a client who started an LLC in 2019, but because the LLC didn't make enough revenue, the LLC didn't pay her a full salary until 2020. If she received a promissory note in lieu of the salary in 2019, she include the amount of the promissory note as the payroll expense. Unfortunately not. However, she might have a little bit of relief, because technically you have the option of taking your 2019 actual salaries paid and using that to calculate your average monthly salary, or you can take the first 2 months of salary paid in 2020 and extrapolate it over 12 months. So if she did start taking a salary in 2020, then she can use that as her borrowing base calculation to calculate her average monthly payroll. So she does have some options there. Thank you for the nice note. What money is available without need for repayment? So the money that's available, so the way that that's calculated without need for repayment is based off of your average monthly payroll times 2.5. So, and why that random number? Maybe it's random, but we like to think that because everybody's expectations are that the virus is under control within the next 2.5 months, and that because I'll echo what Mark said earlier. We're hopeful that this is a faux downturn and that it's not indicative of a poor economy. It's an indicative of a freak occurrence. And if that is the case, then we fully anticipate that after a couple of months, people are going to be hiring people back, and business will go back to, while it will be different for sure, we'll go back to be able to do things that we're doing from a business perspective. And so that's what the 2.5 times is they're saying we want to be able to provide resources for you to be able to withstand the next 2.5 months without firing your people. Now, keep in mind, I've been advising all of my clients, as soon as you apply for the loan and get accepted and it gets funded, schedule a call with your CPA to sit down and say, okay, now let's get on the same page, because the decisions you make at that point for the next couple of months are what's going to determine whether your loan is going to be forgivable or not. So, and basically in layman's terms, if you don't fire any of your employees, if you use the funding to pay for, to be able to keep your employees, then the entire amount's going to be forgivable. And even if you do have to let some people go, still very, very favorable terms, very cheap money, as we say. Last question here is, are you also saying I can create new subsidiaries now and apply for the EIDL? Apply. Technically, no. You're going to have to. It has to. If you're applying for a loan, you had to have been in business as of January 20th, I believe, of 2020. It might have been January 10th of 2020. Sometime in January of 2020, you had to be in business. However, as I mentioned before, you can, if you do have the capital, you can use that capital to fund a side project and use the EIDL to fund the working capital of your existing business. And I know that sounds a little confusing, but it's basically getting creative, getting a little bit creative with the financing opportunities that are out there. Because it is very cheap financing. Okay, last question here. A couple more. I applied for the DIL more than 2 weeks ago, then received a letter from SBA a few days ago asking me to reapply under the streamlined application format. Did you experience that? We did, yes. Extremely frustrating. I have to imagine that there were some choice words said when you got that letter in the mail, and I'm sorry you had to experience that. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where love it or hate it. It's working with the federal government and talking from somebody's perspective that has to deal with the IRS on a semi-regular basis. It's one of those things where, yeah, we're just, you just have to reapply and hope for the best. The good thing, again, to reiterate, I think I said this earlier, but with the EIDL, you can request, and I highly recommend you do, you can request a $10,000 advance when you fill out the application. It screams at you. It's in bold print, so you can't miss it. But if you click that, that should hit your account within 72 hours. And so it gets a little bit of cash flow in the door to be able to address some of your immediate needs as a business owner. Okay.
So Caleb, we're going to take one more, and then what we'll do is more questions can be emailed to us, and we can send them to you. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure, no problem. Okay, last question. What about a W-4 employee payments? That's considered payroll, right? Yes, absolutely. So that's exactly what we're talking about here. Your employee payments that you're making. If you contact your payroll provider and ask for a payroll report, that will give you an indication of what we're talking about. Now, one last comment that I'll make, and I know we're at 10 minutes over here, so I appreciate you guys' patience. The last comment that I'll make is the caveat is that for all of your employees that made over $100,000, including the business owners, the benefit is capped at $100,000. So there has been some confusion about people are saying, well, now I'm not going to apply because I don't get any credit for my folks that make over $100,000. Well, that's actually not the case. So there's a formula that you put into place that will cap everybody that is over 100,000 at 100,000. So you still get benefit for those individuals. It's just capped at the $100,000 mark. So,
Caleb, so incredibly helpful and timely, and we are so appreciative of your time and putting the slides together. So I do want to mention again that Caleb and Somerset CPAs and Advisors are giving the PTA members a $750 from $1,000 discount. If you would like to reach out, you can reach out to Caleb. We will send over to you a link, and we'll make all that happen so that you all have all the slides. But again, Caleb, thank you. Very helpful.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm sure you're going to have people reaching out to you, so we really appreciate it. So what I'd like to do is just see if there are any other questions around last week's conversation. We are running over the time frame, and we kind of want to stay tight. But was there any questions that anybody had about the marketing or the logistics and operations conversation? Is there any support that anybody needs from Annette or Tanya or myself? Feel free to ask it now. You can also email it to us, and we can answer that way. Also, if there's any issue that you have throughout the day, starting tomorrow that you need help with, please reach out. We're here for you. We want to support you. But I'll just open it up one more time to any other questions. Great. Oh, no? We good? Great. Okay, so we'll sign off. Thank you very much. Remember, you can go to lizannefalsetto.com and get all the information off the website. Please note that we will be speaking again next Thursday. We'll make sure that you have the resources in advance, and we look forward to a successful week alongside you. Hang in there. We're here with you, and we wish you a happy smile every day. Great.